minutes past 3. Now, Dr. Janina Ramirez is a cultural historian, broadcaster and author based at Oxford University, and her first children's book, Riddle of the Runes, a Viking mystery, is out in 2 days' time. And basically, Janina's taught on everything from classical architecture to the work of Tracy Emin and everything in between. A very, very good afternoon to you.
Hi, Lily. It's lovely to be here.
Lovely to
Everything
have
in
you.
between us is so true.
It is.
I've been teaching for 20 years and I think pretty much everything. Yeah.
I mean, it's astonishing. We will get on to this, but I just want to know, where and when did your interest in the past begin?
I actually have a very clear memory. But I can exactly isolate the moment. So I was 7 years old.
Yeah.
And I went to Hampton Court Palace. And there's one step in Hampton Court where the great kitchen leads up to the hall, and it would have been where all the servants carried the food up the stairs. And this particular threshold has been completely worn down by the feet of all these people walking over it. And I remember being 7 years old, standing on this step thinking, I am part of the passage of time. I'm stepping over this threshold. And that was it. I was bitten.
I love that.
Isn't that
How
funny that I've
wonderful.
remembered it, though? And
Yes.
so I knew that was when it started, but I didn't. Well, this kind of brings me on to the bit, but I didn't intend to do history. I read literature at university because I wanted to write children's books.
Oh.
And it's taken me 20 years.
Just some lecturing and stuff.
Just a little bit of TV and lecturing and radio before I managed to actually write a book for children. So, yeah, it's kind of all come together.
How wonderful. Well, we will get onto this fabulous book and the fabulous recommendation in the first page. But, I mean, as I said in my introduction, there seems to be no part of history that you have not touched upon. But are you sort of expert in one particular bit?
Absolutely. So, yeah, I'm a doctor, PhD, which is a long haul. But for my thesis, for my PhD, I wrote about the Anglo-Saxons, and particularly in the north of England. And in the north of England, there's this wonderful mixture of worlds where the Anglo-Saxon culture, which is a sort of Germanic, Beowulfy warrior culture, are rubbing up against the Celtic Irish, the Scots, the Picts, but also the Vikings. And so all my research has been in that sort of world. And yet they say write about what you know. And so that's what formed the basis of my fiction. But I have taught on everything. I made programs on all sorts of wonderful things, particularly medieval. I feel like the medieval used to get totally ignored. We used to start our history with Henry VIII and his wives.
Yeah.
And that was about as far back as we'd go.
Yeah.
Whereas there's so many wonderful stories and characters from that 1,000 years that people tend to think is a bit dark and dismal. But I think it's wonderful.
Well, I think the Dark Ages we just see the umbrella title, don't we? And
yeah, it's my alarm phrase. If someone says Dark Age to me, I start to have palpitations.
There's so much light and glitter, let me tell you all about it.
Exactly.
But I want to know, Janina, how do you hold all of that information in your one beautiful red-lipped head?
You are so sweet.
I don't understand.
I think the point is, for me as a sort of cultural historian, is it's been a bit like making a tapestry, and the picture sort of builds up slowly over years. So yeah, think of your Bayeux tapestry if you like. But I've got my specialism. I've got my area that I know better than anyone, which is my world that I worked on for 8 years. And then onto that, I've just been growing out my knowledge in different directions, backwards and forwards, and through different mediums in art and literature and all the rest of it. But it all fits on the same canvas because they all move into each other. History is fluid. It's part of a process. So, when you're looking at the Industrial Revolution, there's an important reason that happens when it does, and it's got a backstory. And I'm always interested in the backstory. So I hold it together, but for me, it's all storytelling. History is a constantly unfolding set of stories, and that's what I love about it. I think I'm a bit of a storyteller, really.
Yes, and I love that you use the word sort of the biotapestry and sort of thread, because I imagine, like you were saying, the more you learn about the past and the present, and you get to see sort of a thread or a pattern emerging.
I believe that. And I think some of our best communicators, some of the sort of the thinkers, the writers, the artists who've been able to really leave a legacy are people who take that scary step of going outside of their specialism, stepping out of what they really know really well, and trying to make these long connections across time. And I don't do it as much as I should, but I do like to draw these long historical narratives, the big questions, the big issues that, when I read an old English poem like The Wanderer, I can hear a modern poet like T.S. Eliot speaking in my ear because we all care about life and death and family and love and wealth and fame. And so those things just don't change, but the settings and the environments and the characters change.
The setting is interesting, which moves on to our next point, because this has played out most recently in a social media sort of world, hasn't it? So does that impact on how you present things and also how people interact with you?
That's such a good question. I think we've lived through a huge revolution, a revolution that we won't take stock of for another few decades. But it's like looking back at the invention of the printing press.
Yeah.
The computer revolution and the digital revolution have changed everything. They've redrawn music, all these things I've been saying, but particularly communication and record keeping, because there isn't that sense of putting something down in print. I mean, even when I was growing up, I did all my notes handwritten. I've still got my old school books.
Lever arch file.
Absolutely. Still carry them around when they house move.
Yeah.
But that's changed in my lifetime. And the idea that, I didn't have a mobile phone when I was at university. I'd walk to someone's room and talk to them. Whereas now you can send sort of 4 multiple messages on different platforms. So we've got to take stock. We've got to work out how our minds have adapted in that change and how our human interaction has adapted. But it will take a while for historians to look back and go, wow, wasn't the digital revolution something? Didn't it change things?
But also, I mean, I had a local historian in just a little earlier, and she was saying, I can go back 100 years of this school because there were these fabulous written archives. So we really must take care that the historians of the future go, what was this cloud thing and where is it?
Well, I'm still a massive bibliophile. There's nothing that gets me more excited than a library. It's a sad confession of a book lover. I love books, and I love the fact that I can pick up a manuscript because I'm lucky like that as an Anglo-Saxonist. I can go back to a manuscript that's 1,000 years old, and I can read it and hold it, and it's tangible, and it's still telling me what it needs to tell me 1,000 years later. That's a document. That is a proper lasting thing. But no, we are digitising, and also we have to be responsible about the planet. We have to be responsible about our state of pollution, what we leave behind us.
Yeah,
we're hugely materialistic, and we leave these horrible records of ourselves through plastic bags and through, all the different things we collect. But really valuable things like books, I hope, will continue to be written, made, read, distributed. Buy books, people.
Yes, well, let's get on to your lovely book. By the way, before we just go to Barry White and then talk about your book, I love
Barry White segue.
Yes. I love that we can look at your PhD thesis in PDF. I tried. Oh. I did about 2 pages.
Oh, bless. No, well, this is what you were saying about changing. I try and change rapidly to suit the changing audiences, and I really I've got young children myself, and I really want to keep up to date with how they're doing things. So I make all my resources online for free. I do periscopes, which are free broadcasts. I do podcasts, which are free, and I made my book available free as well. So because I just want everyone to have access to good quality information, and I want to share.
I know. I love that about you. Back with Janina after back. Just a little interlude there between my conversation with the lovely Dr. Janina Ramirez, who has a new book out. She is a historian, and this is Janina's first children's book. She's waited basically 20 years to write. The Riddle of the Runes, a Viking mystery. In 2 days, you can get your mitts on it. But I've got one here that is exciting. Do you know what? When I mentioned it in the newsroom, Janina, people love a Viking. I don't know why that is.
There are lots of reasons that we love a Viking. One of the reasons we love a Viking is one that I'm sort of destroying, which is some of the myths that come with Vikings. We have a really clear vision in our head that's come from Asterix. It's come from, all these various cartoons.
The horns.
Beard, quite brutish, ready to attack anybody and have a fight. Now, none of that is true. Oh. They didn't have horns on their helmets.
Okay.
I know, sorry. Myth busting number 1. The other one is that they're not really smelly barbarians. They were incredibly vain, incredibly fastidious.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely. They got more tweezers and combs and beads.
The ginger locks.
Absolutely. But in the place of that sort of myth, what I find so intriguing about them is that they were the ultimate international travellers. They were the ones that got over to the coast of America 500 years before Columbus. They got over and settled in Russia. They went down to Constantinople. They covered the whole of the known world. And everywhere they went, they were fascinated by the people and cultures that they encountered. So back in Sweden, in a burial, you'll find things like a little jade Buddha that's come from the Silk Road because they loved it and they thought it was interesting and fascinating. So I see them as this ultimate curious,
Yes.
determined adventurers. They're going out there, and that's where my character comes from.
Yes.
She's got that spirit of curiosity and adventure.
Yes, tell us about what little mini adventure does your big adventure
Well,
does she go on?
It's a 4-part series, so there's a sort of overarching big mystery that will evolve over the books. But each book is a standalone, and this one is a mystery based on one of the things that I studied years ago, which is an object called the Frank's Casket. It's in the British Museum, and it's a box about the size of a shoebox, and it's covered on every side. It's made of whalebone, but it's covered with pictures and runic inscriptions. And it's such a baffling object that archaeologists and people who've studied it still can't fully decode it.
Wow.
After all this time. So I've always been intrigued by it. I've always thought, gosh, wouldn't it be great to have some sort of riddling object? Because they obviously had them, they understood how to decode them. And that's what's at the heart of this book, is a riddle of the runes. So the riddle is on a casket. But it plunges straight into action at the beginning, which is that a warrior has been taken from the mountainside, dragged away in the night, disappears. And Alva's uncle Magnus is the wisest man in the town. He's sort of main investigator. But she wants to help him. She wants to assist him. And with her lovely wolf, Fenrir, can you see? Gorgeous Fenrir.
He's gorgeous.
He's absolutely gorgeous. And his little story's told in this book too. But they go off and they start these wonderful adventures. And he's actually trained as a sniffer wolf, so he can find clues like no other animal. But it was an absolute joy to write, because at the heart of it is this shield maiden, my girl Alva. She's 12 winters, and she was everything I wanted in a heroine growing up. I love strong female leads. I love Philip Pullman's Lyra. I love Alice in Wonderland. But I wanted a physically strong girl, a girl that can hold her own in her body as well as in her mind and imagination. And that's what she is. So she is a fighting, brave young woman.
How amazing. And what I love is, I mean, you've alluded to a couple of great Oxford professors and people who'd written as well. And it seemed to me when I was looking through the gorgeous drawings by David Wyatt that there's these landscapes that are very Middle-earthian, if I'm honest.
Absolutely.
That's not a coincidence.
Not a coincidence at all. So my specialism is Old English literature. JRR Tolkien was professor of Old English literature. I've grown up with the same thoughts and stories in my head as he had in his head, and we've been influenced by the sources together. But already people who've read the book have said, yeah, there's echoes of Tolkien, there's echoes of, I mean, this is like the highest praise imaginable, but echoes of C.S. Lewis, those sort of fantasy scapes, but it's not fantasy, it's real. So I haven't put elves and dwarves and dragons in it. I have got real people whose stories are just as exciting and fascinating.
Yeah, so we don't need Elvish, we've got actual runic
Old Norse inscriptions. So, there's a whole load of decoding. I love the fact, one of the things my kids have enjoyed about reading it is you've got to decode the runes, but the back of the book has got the runes in there. So when you're going through, you're doing this sort of decoding, you're flicking to the back, checking the runes, scribbling down what they mean. And so there's this whole code-breaking element to it, which is, again, brilliant. Very Bletchley Park.
It is, yes. It was just over the border. Right, well, we have to go to travel, but I have one question, finally. I mean, this is out in 2 days, which is fabulous, Riddle of the Runes of Viking Mystery. But our homework question for today, set for us by Year 6 at Edward Fields Primary School, is if you were a Greek god, what power would you have? Janina, in 3 words maximum, what are we going to go for?
I would be a mind reader.
Okay.
I would love to understand how people feel and think at any one time. I would love to switch on and off invisibility, slide in and out of places. And I think I would like the power of making people love me. Making them fall in love with me.
Well, I've fallen in love with you over the last 20 minutes. Thank you so much. Good luck with the book and everything, and keep in touch.
Thank you, hon.
Thank you so much.